Hey beautiful people, what is up and welcome back to my channel, and thank you for stopping by for today's chatty get ready with me. So I'm getting ready and I figured why not do a quick little chatty get ready with me. I've been wanting to do this for a while because I have grown, not significantly, but I feel like there are a couple of new folks here and I wanted to, pause and reintroduce myself because I don't think I've done it since I started my channel, and we are now 2K deep, almost 3,000. So I figured I would do a little bit of a chatty get ready, kind of like introducing myself, telling you guys a little bit about myself in case you were interested. Now with that, what I decided to do is use a couple of new products which I picked up during the Sephora VIB sale. So you're gonna get a bit of a demo as well as me just telling you guys about myself. So the focus products for today are gonna be the Pat McGrath Midnight Voyage palette. This is the little mini baby one, and then the one size matte primer, and that's the new product. So that's pretty much the only two that I'm really gonna focus on for today's video. So how I kind of want to do this is I want to tell you guys a little bit about some of the things that I've learned, or some of the differences that I've realized now being a Trinidadian immigrant living in the US for over a decade at this point. So it's gonna be just sort of my observations, my thoughts, which I hope is fun because I've been documenting this and I'm excited. Per usual, because this is a chat to get ready with me, I'm not going to spend too much time telling you guys exactly what I'm wearing on or how I'm applying things, because it's about the conversation, right? So all of the product details will be listed down below if you are curious and want to know more about it. Just so you see up close, this is the palette, this is the Midnight Voyage. These are all repeat shades in Pat's line, but I was feeling purple today, so here we are. Okay, I just brought you guys in a little bit closer, so let's go ahead and dive in. So welcome again. If this is your first time joining me, I'm super excited to have you here. And if you've been here on the channel for a while, honestly, thank you so much for the support. It means more than you guys know that you all enjoy my content and you engage with my content. And I've been wanting to come back and do a sort of let me introduce myself video for a while, like I said, because I feel like there are a number of you who came in sort of the later end of last year and the beginning of this year, and I just want you to feel like you know me a little bit more. So most of you guys, or a lot of you guys, have actually already picked up on the fact that I have an accent, and that accent is Trinidadian. So I was actually born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago. They are twin islands in the Caribbean, and when I say born and raised, I mean born and raised, as in I lived there until I was 18. So the vast majority of my life, and in my opinion, all of my formative years, like, I am entirely who I am because of the fact that I grew up in Trinidad and I had that experience of really like living, being seeped in my culture. So when I moved to the US, because I was 18, I was pretty much an adult when I got here. Now that's not to say that there aren't certain things about living in the US that have affected me and changed me in specific ways, but at the core, I like to think that my entire sort of moral structure and viewpoint is really shaped by my Trinidadian background. So yeah, and I do want to say, like, I appreciate when you guys point out that, you hear my accent and you want to know if I'm Trinidadian. Most of you all are spot on when you're like, are you a Trini? And I appreciate that. Or you all just ask straight up, like, what island are you from? Nothing pisses a Caribbean person off more than when you ask them if they're Jamaican and they're not Jamaican. Because Jamaica is not the only island, not even close or by a long shot. So just something to note, if you think somebody has an island sounding accent, just ask them where they're from. Don't just assume they're Jamaican, because it's annoying. And I don't think I've had any one of you guys actually ask me if I'm Jamaican. It's usually like, are you a Trini, or like, what island are you from? So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So speaking about accents, that actually gets me to the first point that I want to make. And one of the things that I noticed after living here for several years is that there are different accents. I remember first, thinking and believing that all Americans sound the same, or as we like to say back home, everybody have a Yankee accent. And to be quite frank, that's how I viewed it for several years, because I could not differentiate the difference between most American accents. To me, everybody sounded the same. But now, having lived here for a very, very long time, like I said, it's been over 10 years at this point. I still have more years in Trinidad than I have in America, but it's been 10 years. And now that I've been here for that long, I've realized that there are very, very distinct accents, and it could be by state, it could be by region, but they're different. And that is partly because having lived here for so long, I've now had the opportunity to really interact with a ton of people across different regions from different backgrounds, and I can really now hear some of the nuances of it. And you know what? I think part of the reason why I feel like I had the assumption that everyone really had the same accent, and bringing that from Trinidad, is because, to be quite honest, I think a lot of us, when we live in Trinidad and we are exposed to American people, it's usually folks that are kind of, I would say, East Coast American. And I'm going to say East Coast, I'm thinking like predominantly like New York. So they all will kind of sound the same to us. But I don't know how many of us are exposed to people that are deep Southerners or Midwesterners, where we get to hear the different accents. And that is something that I'm learning now, or have been learning the past couple of years, as I started interacting more with people who are from the Deep South or people who are from the Midwest, because I hear those tiny little nuances, the little drawls that they have, the way in which they pronounce specific words. Like water is one of those words where you just don't know what you're gonna get. Like, New Yorkers pronounce it differently than everybody else. If you're from Boston people have, honestly, I think the accent is kind of similar to like how we say things in the Caribbean, because a lot of Americans tend to take the ERs of words and make them whereas it's kind of hard for us, right? So instead of saying car, we say car, and we like, that's it. Which so we cut things off, and we are very like direct. So yeah, that's one of the first things that I noticed, is that there are different accents. People do talk differently. There's also, like, in a lot of ways, a different language across some of these regions and states. And I always like to use the example of, like, just between New York and New Jersey. If you're in New Jersey, you're gonna hear people say hoagie. If you go to New York, it's gonna be a sub. And it's like, it's the same thing, right? And you cross the bridge, and it's suddenly this product is known as something else. But that was something that I did kind of like appreciate, seeing the different cultures. And I'm saying cultures kind of loosely here, so just go with me. But basically the different cultures of the different states, because there are distinct differences. And the accents is one that I am learning and picking up more of the longer I am here, and the more I get to interact with people from different backgrounds and different states. Do I have a favorite accent? I don't think so. I don't. Like, I like saying the word Missouri, because I just think it sounds really cool. Like, I like the Southern accent because it's kind of drawly, but it's also hella slow. Like, one thing I do think is consistent across pretty much all Americans is the speed in which they talk. Like, Caribbean people, we tend to race and rattle off our words, and I find that all Americans, regardless of region, so north, south, they talk slow. And that always kind of bothers me, because I'm like, okay, can you get to the end of the sentence? And Southern people, they are in no hurry. So while I love their accent, it's so slow, and I'm like, please speed up. But yeah. So the next difference that I've noticed between living here and living back home is, and this one still irritates me, is the fact that people here don't say, and I'm saying here, and for context, I live in the Northeast. I feel like it might be different down south. But anyways, people don't say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. That's just not commonplace. Now, if you are Caribbean or if you're Trini, you know what I'm talking about. We have been taught, it's been ingrained in us, that when you enter a room, you say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. You acknowledge the people in there. That is just something that you say. It is a sign of respect. If you don't do it, you have no brought up seat. And you can't be out here embarrassing your family like that. So I just assumed that the rest of the world did that was like a salutation that everyone did. It's not. It really isn't. And I remember when I first moved here and I started in college, it was something I would do. Like I would walk into like my lecture hall and I'd be like, good morning, and nobody would answer me. And especially when you're in school in Trinidad, that's one of the things that's deeply ingrained in you, because you stand when a teacher enters a classroom, right? So when I was in convent, you would be in class. We didn't like move around the school like they do here in America. So you had your set class, you were there all day, and teachers would come to the class and you would stand and you would say, good morning, miss, whatever. And that's just how you greeted everybody. You walked into a room. If people were there, you acknowledged it. And it really bothers me till this day that is not something that people do here. Again, I don't know if this is more commonplace in the South, but in the Northeast, they don't do that. They do not do that. And it bothers me. Because like I said, for us, it is a sign of respect. And you know what bothers me even more about like the fact that people don't do that when they walk into a room is they also don't respond when you say good morning. And my thing is, if somebody says good morning, shouldn't you just say good morning back? Like, just out of like pure courtesy and respect. And people don't do that. And that is something that I haven't been able to let go. It really still irks my soul that people just don't do that. Now, I am one of those people where if I walk into a room and I say good morning and you don't answer me, I will say good morning louder until you answer me, because I know you heard me and now you're just ignoring me, which makes me even more aggravated, because who you think I talking to? You know? So it's something that really did strike me as odd that, you know, it wasn't just something that everybody did. And of course, you know, like no one's obligated to do that, obviously. But I remember being like, oh, so y'all don't tell people good morning here? Now, if you are American, whether that's North, South, you know, let me know. Is that something that is commonplace? Like how do you feel about that? Like, I'm genuinely curious from the perspective of a non-Caribbean person. Like, how do you feel about those kind of greetings when people just generally walk into a room? Is it something that you grew up with? Because like I said, I do think that it is probably more commonplace in the South, but I want one of you guys to verify that for me. Now, there are a lot of things that I have done to sort of acclimate to being in the US, but I don't think that is one I'm ever going to really let go of. Like, I do like walking into a room and saying good morning and greeting people, so I will continue to do that, and probably still continue to feel a kind of way when people ignore me, but it's okay. It's okay. I'm gonna keep my brought up, see. And before we go any further, I do want to say that when I'm talking about the differences here, it's not for me to bash America or to bash Trinidad. Like, that's not it at all. I'm just telling you guys my experience sort of having lived in both countries and how I feel about certain cultural things that are just different across both. But I'm not saying one is better than the other by any means. It's just, these are things that I noticed and I thought that I wanted to share. So please don't take it any kind of way, because it's definitely not meant to be that. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about, the next thing that I noticed that is obviously, that was probably one of the more obvious things in the US, is that nothing is free. Like, absolutely nothing is free. And you know what struck me about the fact that nothing being free is when we tried to go to the beach in New Jersey, which, whatever you're thinking about for a beach, if you're watching me and you're not from the States, lower your expectations. If you live in the Caribbean, it's not the kind of beach that we used to, just saying. But I remember going to the beach and you had to pay to get onto the beach, which was so wild of a concept for me, because I'm so used to Trinidad where beaches are free. You pick up yourself, you pack up yourself, and you go to the beach. Like, you don't have to pay to enter the beach. And, you know, that really did strike me as like, oh, okay, interesting. Even like other things, like going for a hike, going outside, going for a nice walk in a specific park or something like that, you might have to pay to do that hike or to enter that you know, enter nature to enjoy it. And I was always like, wait, what the hell? Like, and it does make me a little bit sad because I do think that that cost could be a barrier for a lot of people. Don't get me wrong, there are still a lot of free things to do that involve like free hikes and whatnot that don't require you to pay. But I remember thinking like, oh, this could really hinder some people, because imagine you want to go to the beach and it's you and your family, you maybe like 5 people, and you have to pay what, $5-10 per person to get onto the beach. Like, that could be a hard one to swallow. And you know, for a long time it rubbed me the wrong way. But one of the things that I did come to realize with that is that that is also the reason why the beaches and the trails and all that other stuff look the way they do here, because they have the funding from charging people to have those experiences, to maintain them. Like, you don't find beaches covered in litter or trails that are overgrown, that you can't pass or anything like that, because the cost of entry, oh, that little spit, the cost of entry is used to maintain those grounds, which is something that I think is such a cool concept. And in some ways, while I don't want, you know, Trinidad to adopt something that makes it harder for people to just go outside and enjoy Trinidad, it is something to think about in terms of how we maintain some of our natural resources. Because in addition to it being the cost of maintaining those beaches and whatnot, it's also for the cost of like lifeguards to staff those beaches. Now, obviously, as an island, we have a lot more beaches and a lot more places that would require that, but I don't know if anyone has ever like really studied the statistics and the logistics of how many people have drowned at like our main beaches like Maracas, Las Cuevas, and whatnot, and how funds are allocated to staff those beaches with lifeguards so that people can be safe and during all times, right? Because that's the other thing too that I had to like take into account with being in the States, is that a lot of these things here tend to be seasonal, right? Where you just need to be able to staff that beach with a lifeguard for 2 months, 2.5 months, maybe 3, because it's gonna be winter again. But in Trinidad, because we are so year round, we have the same temperature year round, our beaches don't close, that would require some additional funding and whatnot. But, you know, just a thought, just something that I you know, that really stuck with me and does stick with me when I think about the fact that everything comes at a price. And you really have to be thoughtful about your living expenses, because you really do pay for everything. Heck, even the air you breathe comes at a price. Okay, now that the eyes are done, I'm going to go in with the One Size Secure the Sweat Primer. This is actually the second time that I'm using this. I used it yesterday to test it out. I went into the office for work and it held up nice. Like, granted, it wasn't the hottest day, but I was doing a little bit of walking around and sweating a little bit, and I felt like it held up really well. So I'm looking forward to keep testing this and seeing how it continues to hold up as it gets hotter and hotter, because this summer, y'all, I am like 95% sure that it's gonna be brutal. And I'm gonna use my Givenchy foundation today. Okay, so speaking of nothing being free, the next point that I want to talk about in terms of like the difference between the US and living in the States that I've seen is that there is so much to do here that has absolutely nothing to do with drinking and partying. And I love that. Like, don't get me wrong, I like to go shake my bottom every now and then. I love me a good fete. You know, I'm Trini. Like, yeah, we love a good fete. We love a good party. But I remember growing up, but when I think about, you know, growing up in Trinidad, you know, my recollection is that so much of my, like, experiences were tied to partying, drinking, and not in, like, a bad way, because I think that because alcohol is such a part of our cultural experience that we don't have the same level of fascination with it to the point where we're like obsessed need to have it. At least that for me, you know, it was never like this thing that I was obsessed with because it just was always there. It just always existed. There's no fear around it. There's no fascination around it. It just is. It's kind of like water. But like I said, growing up back home, there was always a party. There was always a fete, something to go to. But that was kind of what it was. Other than that, I remember, you know, hanging out in the mall. But then you just kind of like walk around the mall, which, I mean, sure, great, we did that. But it's very different to the things that I see here in terms of like I said, there's so much to do that has nothing to do with drinking, nothing to do with partying. And some of it's the most random things. For example, axe throwing. The fact that that is a thing here, that somebody came up with the idea of like, hey, how about we just get axes and throw it at a piece of wood and we charge people to like come and throw axes at a piece of wood. And it's actually a lot of fun. And you can just go and you can chill and just like do something ridiculous like that. There's Top Golf, which is like basically an indoor golfing putting center. You could do mini golf inside, outside. Escape rooms. Literally, you pay someone to lock you and like a group of people in a room for an hour and you have to solve puzzles to get out. Paint and sips, like all of these things. And especially when it comes to like outdoor activities, hiking, theme parks, all of that. There's just so many things that you can do that have nothing to do with partying, that have nothing to do with drinking and alcohol. And I love that. One thing that you guys have heard me say a ton on this channel is that I appreciate experiences. That really is how I feel overall. I like doing things. I want to try something new. Now, granted, I ain't no daredevil. I am not going to be jumping out to nobody plane. I don't like theme parks. I don't like the adrenaline rush of some activities. Like, that's not me. I am not here for the crazy adrenaline rush. I want the soft experiences. I want to go on the nice hike and look at the pretty view. I want to go like touch the little dolphins or whatever. You know, not shark cave dive, you know, like cage diving to see sharks. None of that. I want these soft experiences. And I love that there are so many opportunities for me to have new experiences that have nothing to do with partying. Sometimes they can be really affordable. Sometimes they're free. Like, hikes are free. And I love going on hikes. And knowing that I'm going on a hike on a trail that's well maintained, where I feel really safe and I can just enjoy it. And I feel like it makes me sad when I think about the fact that I didn't have those experiences in Trinidad, because it's a beautiful island. I can only imagine the amount of waterfalls and cool lakes and rivers that we have that I didn't get to experience because I don't know where those trails are. Are those trails even maintained? I know that there's a group that I follow on Instagram that does do hikes, and I can't remember the name. If I find it, I'll pop it up for you guys. And I watch their Instagram posts all the time, and they do tours for people to come and see the hikes. So they know where the trails are. But when I think about myself, having lived in Trinidad for such a long time, I don't know where any of these trails are. I think about all of the like nature that I didn't get to experience because it wasn't really ingrained as a part of like the experience of growing up there, which again does make me feel sad. And I would love to see Trinidad incorporate more things that are just like you hang out, you have fun, bowling, like arcades for adults. You know, all of those things are things that I would love to see become a part of the culture, and just give people other outlets to do things, especially things that are tied to being outside and enjoying and exploring all that our island has to offer. Both of our islands have to offer, because it really is a beautiful place, and I think most of us are missing out on that beauty, or are not fully engaged in what the island has to offer. The islands have to offer. Yeah. Now, if you do know of new non-party things that are happening in Trinidad that you want to highlight, please leave them down below, because I would love to hear what else there's going on. If there are groups that you know do things like lead tours or hikes and whatnot, also leave that down below, because I would love to be able to like when I come home, check out some of those tours and do some of those hikes and be really intentional with exploring my island more. Okay, I'm going in with my Kosas concealer, which y'all know I'm trying to empty this because it ages like an avocado. And it's definitely too orange for me. And I feel like I'm almost done with this, which I'm surprised by because I haven't been using it that long. And I've had other concealers last way longer than this, but I'm like scraping these sides to get product out. So, oh no, y'all. I don't know. I need to wash my brushes. How am I going to blend this out? I have a small stippling brush that I've never used before. So we're going to try to use that to blend out this concealer. This is from the old Sephora Pro line, which they've since redone. Like, you can see how orange my under eyes are, right? I'm going to have to add another concealer on top of this to just give this a little bit more neutral slash, well, not really neutral. I want to add some yellow to this to make this a little bit less orange. It kind of looks like a color corrector. I'm going in with a little bit of 35N. This is from the Sephora collection. This definitely has a more neutral undertone. I'm only taking a little bit of that and adding it to the inner part to really help with some of that orangeness. I don't want to add too much because the heavier my concealer is, the more prone it is to creasing, which I've started getting lately, which is weird for me because I don't usually get creasing. But oh no. Yeah, that's helping to neutralize some of that orange. Awesome sauce. And I'm gonna go ahead and set it with my Duma Blend loose powder. Okay, to set my entire face, I'm gonna go in with my Essence and my two face powders because one is a little bit lighter, one is a little bit deeper. You know the drill. Anyways, continuing along. So the next difference that I want to talk about that I noticed between the two is people just value your time differently in the US. Like, it is really hard sometimes when I go home and I have to do things like say if I'm home and I have to go to the bank with my parents or go to the passport office or the licensing office and realize that that is a full day affair. That's a different level of frustration because that would never happen here. You would never go to any kind of building and be sitting there, unless it's public benefits because America. But for the most part, if you're going to a place where for the most part, when you go into most establishments, your time is valued and people are trying to help you to get you out of there as quickly as possible. You are not going to spend 8 hours, a whole working day trying to get something done. And I don't know, it's just customer service looks very different in the US than it does in Trinidad. And I would love to see some level of like integration of better customer service into Trinidad. Because I'm not gonna lie, when I go home, sometimes you people just be looking vexed for no reason. Like, I didn't do nothing to you. I walk into your establishment with a smile on my face, with a resting, like, happy face. Like, good morning, how you doing? And to be greeted with the kind of screw pan that some of these people have, I'd be like, but I ain't do you nothing. I just here trying to get my business done, trying to patronize your establishment most of the time, and you giving me attitude for what? For why? I ain't do you nothing. So that's one of the things that I struggle with going back home, because when you're used to being treated with a certain level of like respect as a customer, as a consumer, And it's not only because we have like pretty strong like customer service expectations here in the US, but usually it's because people are just generally nice a lot of times, that going home can be really hard to deal with bad customer service, like really, really hard, because I'm not used to that no more at all. Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about is, and I'm going in with my Dior bronzer. Now, I did pick up a backup of this during the Sephora VIB sale, but I'm using my old one because I'm trying to like completely pan it. So the next point I want to talk about is the fact that the US is extremely diverse, but not connected, whereas I feel like there's a lot of diversity in Trinidad, but connection as well. And you know, when I first started to feel that was when I was in college, because growing up in Trinidad, one of the things that we do is we celebrate everything. Like, we have every single holiday possible. And we celebrate Eid, we celebrate Diwali, those are national holidays. And I remember learning about all of those things in school. Like, we would get diyas, we would paint them, and all that other stuff. So I always felt connected to different sort of, not really cultures, but religions, but even cultures as well. I always felt connected to all of the different cultures within Trinidad, because, you know, as an island, we are a melting pot. We have people that were brought over as slaves, people that were brought over as indentured laborers. So the country really is a mix of all of these different cultures, even things that we've adopted from our colonizers. And despite the diversity, it always felt like we were celebrating each other and everyone. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of like division in certain areas, and especially when it comes to politics, and we see that here too. But I always felt connected to the other cultures, and here it's so much more diverse, but it's so separate. And separate down to like the minute pieces of it, to the point where I even see separation across like the Black diaspora. Like, you can definitely tell the differences between people that are African versus African American versus Afro-Caribbean. And I wish it was more connected. I wish there were more opportunities to feel like you could be involved and engaged in other cultures, and get that experience. And I do think that there's two pieces to it. Somewhere it's kind of hard to get into some of those groups and into some of those settings. Like, I do think it's easier when you're in a college setting, because you can attend some of the cultural events, you can participate, you can be really like deep in it in that way. But a lot of times in the real world, like, you don't get to experience a lot of it. And sometimes if you are an outside coming into a certain event, you may not feel fully comfortable because they don't make you feel fully comfortable. And people, you know, have their reasons for like being whatever. But either way, I just felt like the disconnectedness. Like, holidays would come up, like it would be Diwali and it would be Eid, and I would completely not know about them because nothing is ever really talked about or celebrated the way that we do back home. And that's just something that I miss. The diversity and being able to celebrate diversity in the way that we did is the piece that I miss. And usually it's like, it's more like the racial and religious diversity, because when it comes to other identities like sexual orientation and all that other stuff, that's like a big no-go in the Caribbean. It still is. Like, if you are not a heterosexual person, you don't, it's not, the Caribbean is not as far along in its thinking when it comes to sexual orientation or sexual preferences. The next difference that I want to talk about, which honestly is kind of related to the previous one, is that here I feel like it's so easy to be surrounded by people, but to feel alone. And I don't know, there's just a level of everybody minding their business that happens in the US that doesn't really happen in the Caribbean. And I guess it could go either way, right? Because in the Caribbean, I feel like we're all so connected, where you call this person auntie even though they're not your auntie. This person know your grandfather, your grandmother, and, you know, like, families and generations are connected in a way that everybody's kind of looking out for everybody else. And there's a little bit of a community, because sometimes it's the same family, same generations living in the same neighborhood for such a long time, that there's still a level of like feeling connected. And I feel like sometimes here I be thinking that if something were to happen, people would close their eyes and go the other way, because it's a level of not my business, not my problem, I don't want to get involved. And I think that that is for good reason in some ways, because you never know what could happen. It is such a dangerous country in some ways that sometimes it makes sense to mind your business and, you know, stay out of people situations. But I do feel like it has made it really hard for me to really connect with people, even when I'm surrounded by people, because I don't get the same sense of like community feeling and knowing that if anything would have happened, these people would have my back. Like, these people would be there for me the way in which I feel like my community in Trinidad would rally around me. And you know, I do think that part of it is like having had my formative years being in Trinidad, like the people that I'm the closest to are the people that I like grew up with, the people that my best friends that I consider sisters. Like, all of those things just resonate a little bit differently with me. Like, do I make friends here in the US? Yeah, I have a ton of friends here. Is it the same level and depth of friendship as what I have with the people that I grew up with back home? Honestly, no. And that it doesn't make it any less. It doesn't make it like less of a friendship. It's different. It's so different, and it's something that I have come to terms with. It's something that I am figuring out more and more now when it comes to my friendships. And I think like adult friendships are also something that I think I'm figuring out in general, because it's so hard making friends as an adult, and I think it's an important thing to do. I'm not the type of person that wakes up and it's like, no new friends, I don't want to meet nobody, I'm fine, you stay over there. No, I like, if I vibe with somebody and you are cool, I'm all open to like a friendship. Like, that's just how I am. But I will say that even as long as I've been here, I still feel the difference in the connections that I make and the friendships that I form than the ones that I have with just my people. The people that I grow up with, the people that that are Trini, the people that are Caribbean, the people that just kind of get it. Okay, let me finish my waterline really quickly. And I think I have one more thing, and then we'll wrap up this little getting to know me video. Okay, I'm back, and this is the final look. All I did was I went ahead and I put on some of the Pat McGrath Astral Flash, the Lush Gloss in Astral Flash Dance. It's kind of like a purpley gloss, so I thought it went well with the eye. Okay, and the last thing that I wanted to talk about, sort of difference-wise between, you know, what I've experienced living in the US and living in Trinidad, is that I've discovered this sort of newfound fait of the mundane. And I'm like struggling to figure out how to explain this, because, you know, there's just a sense of relief that I get when I come home, because I just feel safe there. And I'm not saying that the US is by any means an unsafe space, but having lived here for over a decade, I am like hyper aware of like every part of my identity, you know, understanding that I'm a woman, understanding that I'm Black, understanding that I'm an immigrant. And with sort of the political issues that this country has had for several years now, I feel like I'm always on high alert, and I never really notice that until I go home, and I just feel all of that like weight just like melt away and just mesh. It just like disappears, because at home I feel safe. I feel like I can just exist without thinking about it. Like, hey, I'm always, you know, head on a swivel, thinking about my surroundings, trying to figure out like where I can and cannot go, where I will and will not feel safe. I also think that there are just sort of more large-scale events that happen here that don't really happen in like Trinidad. Like, we don't have mass shootings, we don't have serial killers, we don't have any like crazy bombings or any of those things. Like, those are just things that don't happen. And hey, I'm always like in doing the mundane tasks, wondering what's gonna happen. Like, obviously there are places in Trinidad where it's not safe to go. Like, you know those neighborhoods, you know what not to do to be safe. And here I feel like sometimes I get that level of safety, but sometimes I don't. And sometimes it's in the mundane task of like doing groceries, going to church, where I'm like, am I safe? Is this gonna work? And I do think that part of that is just by virtue of how large America is as a country, you know, compared to how small Trinidad is in terms of the level of crime and the proportion of crime. So I do think that this isn't in any ways unique to the US. I think it's something that I would experience whether I was in the US or another large country in the UK or something like that. But that's that. Okay, so overall, those are like the quick things that I wanted to share difference-wise about what I experienced growing up in Trinidad and now having lived in the US for about a decade. I hope that gives you some kind of idea of who I am. If you do have questions for me, let me know down below. And if you want to see a part 2, I can think of some other differences or similarities to share. So leave that down in the comments below. So as always, don't forget to like, leave a comment. If you haven't already done so, go ahead and subscribe on your way out, join the fam. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you more than you know, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye. Oh, also really quickly, I like the eyeshadow, and we'll see about the primer.